Whilst eating disorders are more common than we might think, they generally aren't spoken about widely or have much public awareness around how to support someone with an eating disorder. Lack of awareness and support can really hinder someone living their fullest and can have detrimental effects on their home, social and work life. I had the privilege to speak with a lived, experienced leader and activist in the eating disorder space, James Downs, to find out more about his own experience and how we could be better allies to support someone experiencing an eating disorder.
My name's James and I'm a mental health campaigner. I talk about some of my experiences to help improve mental health services, and in particular I work in eating disorders. That's been some of my experience. So I do bits of research and policy, and on the side I teach yoga and dance, which is like my fun job.
Amazing. And what do you see right now in terms of, because you work in the space, right? You campaign in the space. What do you see right now needs to change in the space, would you say?
I think people need to be able to get help sooner, but I think that's definitely the case for people who we don't normally see. So I think we have a stereotype, don't we, of eating disorders. We think it's just one kind of person, and actually it's much harder for people from diverse backgrounds to get help sometimes, and we need to see them like more reflected. So I think that's the biggest challenge.
Definitely. And could you open up at all about your own experience with your eating disorder in the past and why that's inspired you or motivated you to do the work that you do now?
Yeah, so I developed anorexia when I was 14, 15, and it took me a really long time to get the right help. So I didn't have proper treatment for nearly 7 years, and that's motivated me to try and make that faster for people, because the impact on me was huge. I had to leave school, I had to drop out of university, and it just affected my whole life. And if I'd had help sooner on, I think that I wouldn't have had that happen to me. So I think it's been really difficult being male, because that's not the stereotype that we have. And so people didn't take me seriously, or they thought it was a different problem than it actually was. So I do a lot of work at trying to represent men and represent people who might not fit the kind of traditional image of eating disorders.
Yeah, that's amazing work and really, really important work as well for different demographics. Do you feel like a lot of change has happened since?
Yeah, I think things are getting better. I think especially for children and young people, we've got more services for eating disorders. I think I'm worried about people who've been unwell for a really long time, and so hopefully we can prevent people from being unwell for a really long time, because then it's only going to be harder to get better. It's still possible, but it's that you might need different things.
Yeah, sure. So thank you for sharing some of your story, as well as telling me about some of the amazing work that you do. I would love to find out how, from your perspective, as someone who has a lived experience of having an eating disorder, what can someone do to help support someone who they might think or is diagnosed to have an eating disorder? What would be the best support that they can give?
I think it's difficult actually, because if you're worried about somebody and think, oh, they might have an eating disorder, what you want to do is help and to go in and fix the problem. And actually somebody might not be ready for that. So I think that being really gentle and encouraging and, trying to open up the conversation without really going in there too hard, I think that's important. And you can't actually make somebody better because you're not a specialist. Like, what you can actually really do is be a really good friend. And so I'd always remind people that being a good friend to somebody with an eating disorder, whether it's like still doing things that they like doing that aren't to do with food, or like offering to go to the appointment with them, like these things are really important too, not just like making sure that they eat or trying to make them better. That can happen if they get the right help, but your role as a friend is to listen and to not judge them, and all those basic friend things that sometimes we forget when we're thinking, oh my goodness, this person needs help. So I'd say still really listen to them, still be really kind, and still keep reaching out to them, even if they might withdraw a bit because they're not feeling very well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really, really good advice. And I think part of that is about journeying with them. as
Yeah.
because if someone's going through something, eating disorder or, a mental health condition, sometimes it might be the first time that they're experiencing it, right? So they're
Yeah.
coming to terms with it as well.
These things sometimes go up and down, don't they? And I think that when somebody's doing really well, that's great. You can share the high moments with them and share their progress and be happy for them. But then it's not always going to be like that. And sometimes for me, it was 2 steps back, 1 step forward, or the other way around, 1 step back, 2 steps forward. And it feels like that sometimes things are just not getting better, and you still need people around you then in those more difficult moments, and then they'll be there with you in the better moments as well. You can end up sometimes feeling like you're treading on eggshells, like, oh, I don't know what to say, what should I say, what shouldn't I say? I think the main thing for me is to try and avoid commenting on things to do with body image and food in quite a negative way. So it tends to be that people with eating disorders will think about these things too much, or it'll be too important for them to focus on the rest of their life because all they're thinking about is food or their body image. And what we don't want to do is reinforce that. And actually, a lot of the ways that we talk about our bodies can be quite negative. And people often say things about food like, oh, I'm having a cheat day, or this kind of stuff where it's sort of to do with guilt. And actually, these things, they might be really common, and we think, we don't really think about when we're saying them, but they could have a negative impact on somebody who's struggling with an eating disorder. So just thinking about how you're talking about food and your body and exercise, I think that can just make you more aware and more sensitive to them and what they're going through. And on the other hand, like, what can you say? I think just actually asking open questions and just sort of showing the person that you're there for them if they want to talk, when they want to talk.
So thank you so much, James, for joining me. Thank you for your openness, your vulnerability, your insights, and also your amazing personal advice that you shared with us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I think it's really important that we have these conversations and that they're just normal, they're not weird, and that we can be positive in thinking about helping people who might be struggling like I did.
Thank you so much. I'm sure this will help someone who is watching.
If you want to find out more about the symptoms of the specific eating disorder that James spoke about, or the most common eating disorders in general, you can search on the NHS website for anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder. Thank you for joining me for this all-important quick set. Please watch the final video to this series to hear from a post-eating disorder survivor who took control of her own health and self-image with the use of dance.